book lovers! Welcome to Authors of Bookstores, presented by A Mighty Blaze. My name is Kimberly Hensle Lowrance. I host and produce the show in partnership with fellow writer Joe Moldover. Here on Authors of Bookstores, we bring to you a conversation between an author and her favorite independent bookstore to shine a light on storytelling, creativity, and the small businesses that enrich our communities. We'll talk books, book selling, writing, and more. We're so glad you're here. Today, I am so pleased to welcome author Elizabeth Ames and bookseller Rachel Cass to the show. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
And if you're eagle-eyed, you may know that I'm wearing gear, merchandise today in honor of Rachel's bookstore. She is calling in today from the Harvard Bookstore in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Let me tell you a little bit about Rachel and Elizabeth. So Elizabeth is a graduate of the University of Wisconsin-Madison and the Helen Zell Writers Program at the University of Michigan, where she won the Hopwood Award. Elizabeth grew up in the Midwest, and she's lived all over, from Seattle to France and from Rwanda to Cambridge, Massachusetts, where she currently lives in a Harvard University dormitory with her family and a few hundred undergraduates. Her debut novel, which I adored, is called The Other's Gold. It was released in 2019 by Viking Books. And then Rachel, as I mentioned, is the buying and inventory manager at the Harvard Bookstore in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Harvard Bookstore is a locally owned, independently run Cambridge landmark since 1932. The bookstore is known for an extraordinary selection of new and used books, an award-winning authors event series, and a history of innovation, including print-on-demand services, local partnerships, and digital media, as well as a fabulous track record of taking all of my money. So welcome, Elizabeth and Rachel. We're so happy you're here. To our audience, if you're watching live with us on Facebook or YouTube, feel free to post a question via a comment below the broadcast, and we'll get to as many as we can later on. Okay, Elizabeth, tell us what about your connection to the Harvard Bookstore? What makes the store so special? What do you admire about the store? Why did you want to talk to Rachel today here on Authors of Bookstores?
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. First, I want to say thank you for having me. Thank you for giving me the chance to talk to Rachel. I mean, I love Harvard Bookstore for so many reasons. I was saying before we started, I spend like half my time and all my money there. And I'm really delighted to be part of this series too. I feel like A Mighty Blaze has been so wonderful in programming for authors, whose events were affected by the pandemic. And I've been curious to hear how that approach has evolved as the pandemic itself has extended, and kind of the thing that emerged from the beginning, the flame still burns. So I'm really pleased and delighted to be part of this series. And I love Harvard Bookstore for so many reasons: the staff, the selection, the location. I'm lucky enough to live like mere blocks from the bookstore, and it was so it was such a lifeline to have the curbside pickup at the start of the pandemic, when it really felt like things weren't open and things weren't as available and we couldn't go into the store. But just the ability to text and say I'm here and have someone come out and hand me the precious package was really nice, because I missed the exchange that I get to have in the store, just like the friendly everyday regular customer exchange. And that kind of human connection was so nice, and remains so nice. I have gone back in the store, and I'm so glad that we're able to, obviously, but I of course miss things about it too. So I could go on, but if you haven't been there, it's also just a beautiful space with an amazing selection, a huge used selection, beautiful children's selection. So many booksellers were really knowledgeable and opinionated, which I love. I've gotten so many good recommendations and just discovered so many books I wouldn't have already read or wouldn't have otherwise read if not for the booksellers there. So that's the big one.
So it's a perfect segue into my question for you, Rachel, which is, you're the buying and inventory manager. So am I right that means that you decide what books get bought for the store?
Yeah, it's like a dream job. It's amazing. So my job, I'm in charge of the buying department. So we have other buyers. I'm not the only one who decides what we carry, but especially for adult books, I do a lot of deciding what we bring in and how many and what we're going to feature on various displays, and that sort of thing. So I get to go through publisher catalogs, And I always describe it as sort of the perfect liberal arts job because I get to be a little bit interested in everything. I read a lot of everything. I mean, I read a lot of fiction, but I read history and some science and essays, and like I read all sorts of things, and I get to be a little bit interested in sort of every topic because I'm buying from university presses and I'm buying from literary fiction presses and small presses and big ones, and it's great. So we have other buyers, so it's not all on me, and we do have a specific kids buyer. But yeah, I oversee that department, and it's great.
How many books are in the bookstore at any given time to sell?
Oh, that's a great question. And I've looked this up recently and I don't remember the answer. I want to say like 13,000, but I'm not 13,000 titles. I could be wrong about that, but it's something around that.
That's a lot of books.
It's a lot of books. Yeah. You should see the publisher catalogs that I go through every season. We don't take nearly all the books that are presented to me. It's a really overwhelming but really fun job.
How do you decide though? I mean, 13,000 books is a lot of books, but they are just a fraction of the books that are being published or have ever been published, right? Because that 13,000 is just not new releases. How do you make that decision?
Yeah, so we work really closely with our sales reps who are fantastic. In the New England region, we have amazing sales reps. And so we meet with them and they can tell us about the author and if they have local connections and tell us sort of context about the book, what kind of publicity the book is expected to get, what other books this new book might be comparable to. So we get all of that information from a sales rep. We do look at a lot of data. I have a math background, so I'm always looking at the data. So particularly if a new book is coming out from an author that has published before or on similar topics, we look at those numbers and decide based on that. But also a lot of it is honestly just intuition, and having been at the store for many years, I've been at the store for 15 years now, many of those on the sales floor. So just knowing the kinds of things that our customers ask about and are interested in, and just having an intuition about, oh, well, I think this is pretty cool. So I think if I put 4 copies on a shelf face out, I think somebody else will also pick it up and think it's cool. And we're very lucky. No, I was going to say, we're very lucky that we can return books to publishers in a lot of cases if we guess wrong, but we do pretty well, and we know our customer base pretty well, and it's, yeah.
So your location is right in Harvard Square. It's a perfect location. Steps, I mean, you cross the street is Harvard Yard.
Yeah.
What's the mix of your customer base? Is it all locals? Do you have students? Is it tourists? Like, how do you... Who's the person who comes and shops at the Harvard Bookstore?
All of the above, and it depends very much on the time of year. If you sort of set COVID aside for a minute, obviously during the academic year, there are a lot of students and professors. So we have a much more sort of academic bent during the academic year. Also just a lot of local customers who aren't necessarily affiliated with the university, but are just local Cambridge residents. But then in the summer, we do typically in a normal year have a lot of tourist traffic. So the books that tend to sell in September, October, or March are a little bit different than the books that sell over the summer, because it's just a different customer base. So that cycle is always really interesting to me. But obviously, COVID changed all that. I'm actually interested in, Elizabeth, in your experience living in a dorm in a year when there weren't really students around or nearly as many. But Harvard was all online last year. So there were some students on campus, but not as many. And a lot of the faculty weren't around. So it was a very different feel, obviously, this year.
Elizabeth?
Yeah. Oh, sure. I mean, I thought about that, and even in relation to the bookstore, because I feel like a typical summer, I have like a part-time job taking pictures for people, just tourists. I think I have a friendly face, and they're like, oh, this lady will take a good picture of our family, and I'm happy to do it. But this last year, I'm just like out of work as a freelance tourist photographer. And I mean, I've seen the line again outside Harvard Bookstore. You know, people are here, and people are back, and students are back, and that's a huge change. Like, I was thinking when you mentioned my bio that I live in this dormitory, this house with hundreds of undergraduates, which was so inaccurate last year. We were like, it was such a ghost town in Harvard Square. Way more than it is in a typical summer for the reason, the tourist reasons and just the obvious reasons. But yeah, and they're back in a big way, and it's really exciting. I mean, I can't deny I'm also anxious just about, it's been so long of kind of squirreling away. And at the house I'm in, there's a huge party today in the courtyard, and there's just so many people, and I just felt like, I mean, they have a vaccine mandate and mask rules for indoor things. It's like testing 2 or 3 times a week, like all these provisions are in place, but there's just this sort of like instinctive reaction of like, whoa, what's happening here? Like, I think it will hopefully take much less time to get used to things returning than it did to things, shutting down. But definitely it's a little head spinning, I think, at this moment. And speaking of, are you in the bookstore or I don't know if people watching know that Harper has offices, like satellite from the bookstore.
Yeah, so I'm in my office. We have offices in a couple of different locations off site. So my office is on Mount Auburn Street. So I'm just like a 5-minute walk from the store, but not in the store itself. I did work from home almost all of the year, and just started coming back into the office at the beginning of the summer. So Elizabeth, when you were talking about how nice it has been to come back into the store, it was also really nice for me to start coming back into the store. And it wasn't that I hadn't been here all year, but I hadn't been here regularly all year in the way that I'm used to. So it's been so nice to come in and park and stop in the store and talk to the booksellers and chat with a few customers and look at the physical books, which I didn't have in my house when I was buying all year from home. So it's been really nice to come back. It feels like home.
No, that's so nice. Yeah, that's like, I mean, that is such a change from the curbside is amazing, but you can't, just like browsing obviously is a dream. And there's so many tables and, the staff recommends and the bestsellers and your picks for each month. And it's just such an amazing place to browse. So I'm glad you got to go back, and we all get to go back.
Yeah.
And if you browse, you might find this wonderful book to read.
Oh yeah, or this version. My Harvard Bookstore. True. I do have some swag.
So Elizabeth, we'll talk a little bit about your book, if we could. So this, I'm not going to talk about what it is, what the book's about. I want you to explain it, but I just want to talk a little bit about the reviews and the feedback you got about this book. Let's see, there was this wonderful recommendation from Jessamine Ward, she's one of my favorite writers. And she said that reading The Other's Gold is like sinking into a lucid dream, wonderful and unsettling in turns, surreally beautiful throughout. Come on.
Yeah. She can really write, even a blurb. She can really write. I feel like a blurb by her is like a novel from another. But.
And the reviews were great. Vogue called your book addictive. Kirkus said it's a memorable look at the moral gray areas that govern our choices. Publishers Weekly highlights the book's moments of powerful emotion. Can you tell our audience, for those people out there who have not yet read The Other's Gold, who will do so after today's show, what is your book about?
Sure. Thank you. I haven't done an event in so long. And I was just like, before this event, I was walking actually around Harvard Square with my own book, like trying to refresh myself a little and thinking like, there's no picture of me on this book, so no one is going to know. Like, I felt so self-conscious, and like, if anyone or if someone that knows me sees me, they'll be like, wow, she just loves to experience her own book. But it has been long enough that I feel like I could maybe read it a little bit like a reader. And I would say, what is it about? It's about 4 friends who meet as undergraduates, and they attend a fictional college called Quincy Hawthorne, and they become fast friends. And then the book traces their connections as they're frayed and tested over maybe 13 years from their freshman year to kind of postgraduate, starting to get married or not, or have children or not. And it's organized around the worst mistake made by each of the 4 friends during this kind of intense and transformative time period.
What inspired you to write this story? Am I right? Am I correct that you were living on the Harvard campus when you started writing?
Yes, I was. I mean, I had been writing some of it before I moved here, but I love campus novels. And I think once I moved here with my husband and a 6-month-old baby. And I was, living right in the heart of a college campus. And I felt like if I'm going to write a campus novel, like I have to do it now. I like to say within sniffing distance, like but still, I'm not a student here, I'm not a teacher here, but I have this interesting perspective of being, too many years removed from college, but fascinated by the sort of social aspects of friendships that are formed at college, and how people are bonded in this really intense moment that they're sort of becoming themselves, both alongside and contrasted against their friends. And I just think the intensity of the friendship that's possible when you live together, many times your first time away from home, is a rich and provocative kind of period of life. So I was really interested in it, yes, and I did. I wrote much of it in cafes around Harvard Square and in Harvard libraries, and I'm really missing those too. Just hoping that as things improve, we can go back into co-ops. I know a lot of writers feel the same.
We put a buy link for the book from Harvard Bookstore underneath the broadcast for those of you who are interested. So another thing that I'm going to jump back to the bookstore now. One of the things that I love about your bookstore, Rachel, and I know I'm not the only one because you won this Best of Boston this past year for your author series. It's an amazing author series in person pre-COVID, but it went online during COVID, and it's like I get the emails and I'm always like blown away by the quality of the writers and the thinkers who come to your store virtually or in person to talk to your audience. Who are the magicians who put that together in the store, and how do they decide who gets invited?
Yeah, Serena Longo is our marketing manager, and she is indeed a magician. She's amazing. We have had a great event series for many years, and lots of both high profile, really big offsite ticketed events, Stephen King and Mindy Kaling and like really big names like that, but then small literary fiction events in the store, poetry events, or we always had an academic series that was sort of geared toward the community across the street. So we've done all sort of run the gamut on events, and it's always so interesting. And I used to be part of the events department. I used to book our events, and it was such a fun part of the job. We had to move online very quickly when COVID started that spring, and the events team really, really worked magic to make that happen and get a lot of our events rescheduled very quickly. And it's been great. It's been a nice way for people to feel connected to the store especially when we couldn't be open and didn't have capacity for very many people to come into the store. And it's also, I'm sure that Serena wouldn't say, and I wouldn't say that we want events to stay virtual, but in some ways there have been silver linings. We've had these conversations between authors and interviewers that we never would have been able to have in person because those people wouldn't have been able to travel to Boston, Cambridge. But because it was virtual, we were able to make some of those happen. So it's been a really interesting learning experience, and now a new sort of tool for us that we're trying to figure out how that will interact with our event series once we can do things in person again.
So Margaret asks a question. I'm sorry, Elizabeth, I jumped in.
Oh no, I just wondered what you would like talking about that, what you would keep from this time. Like I've heard from a lot of authors too who are like, oh, I'll definitely always keep, a Zoom or multiple Zoom events on my tour. Like it's, going to be definitely a part of people's approach going forward. But I wonder what, if you've thought about what you'd keep, and then what you would definitely never like to see or do again.
Since I'm not in the events team anymore, I know they've been talking about this a lot over the last few months, especially as we've been talking toward having in-person events again. And I do think that virtual events, that Zoom events are here to stay in some capacity. And I know as a reader and as a customer, I've sort of enjoyed there were authors this past year that weren't appearing with us, but were appearing with bookstores across the country. And I was so glad to be able to listen in on those events that I would have missed otherwise. So I think we've talked about possibilities like maybe doing a lunchtime author series or doing having normal in-store events in the evening and maybe doing lunchtime virtual events or things like that. So we've been brainstorming, and we're not sure yet, and we're really not sure when we're going to start phasing back in person events. But we've definitely learned a lot about the technology and the power of it, and we've been able to stay connected with customers who may have moved away from Boston and Cambridge, but can still come to our events when they're virtual. So yeah, we're sort of in the process of thinking about that.
Because people might also not know, if they aren't lucky enough to have gone to some of these events, that you sometimes in the past have events at movie theater where you could get movie theater popcorn and go to a literary event. It's like, this was the dream combination. I feel like, I mean,
I think Brattle events were always my favorite events when I was running them. It's a perfect audience size. It's big, but not too big. And yeah, you can have a beer and a popcorn and watch an author talk about their book. And what's better than that?
Is there
totally amazing.
Is there anyone that the bookstores always wanted to get for an event but still has not managed to get? The elusive unicorn of authors?
Good question.
I'm so curious.
I can't. I'm sure there are. My brain has emptied out. I can't think of anyone at the moment. We've been so lucky to have so many great authors over the years. I remember one of the very first events that I booked when I was the events manager was an event with Rachel Maddow, which seemed like an incredible dream. I was so excited to meet her. But we've been lucky to have Zadie Smith come, and Jamaica Kincaid is local, but she's a delight when we've hosted her. And I'm trying to think, so many people. Yeah, I don't know. I can't think of someone off the top of my head. Sorry.
Okay. That's fine. And so we have an audience question from Margaret, which is, what is something that you do uniquely at the store that makes your book events so successful? Is there some secret element or some special element, do you think?
I think as often as we can, we try to have somebody who's interested in the topic introduce the event, and we have a really great staff and a lot of people who are really interested in a lot of different topics. We had a staff member in our marketing team who was really interested in science and helped us launch. We have a science series with Harvard that we started before the pandemic and have been continuing to do virtually. And she didn't launch it on her own, but she worked really hard on it, and it was something that she was passionate about. And that series has been really great and has been a wonderful partnership with the university. So I think that, and also just the range of events that we're able to do in Cambridge, because we have so many people around who are interested in everything under the sun. So we've had economics events and history events, and we've had packed events in the store for mathematics books, which makes me very happy, coming from a math background.
That feels very Cambridge.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's what I always loved about our event series, is that every night of the week there's been an event usually, and they're all on all sorts of different topics. So there's truly something for everyone.
And so definitely local people like Elizabeth and myself, we have been in the store for events in the pre-COVID days. But these events now, these virtual ones, you can participate no matter where you are. So you can go to harvard.com, that's your website, and sign up for your newsletter, and you can find out about all of the events. The other thing you can find out about if you sign up at harvard.com is my favorite, which is your warehouse sale.
Yeah.
Can you tell our audience about the warehouse sale?
Yeah. So the warehouse sale has been going for years. It is now virtual. So we have a warehouse in Somerville. So it's a little ways away from the store, and it's where we process our remainder books. And for people who don't know, remainders are otherwise known as bargain books at other stores, and they're sort of publishers extras that we're able to get at a really low price, and so can sell at a deep discount. And traditionally, we've had this event in the warehouse in Somerville. It's been a weekend or a couple weekends, and it really became a destination event. The warehouse would be absolutely packed. We usually do them. We do one around the holidays and one in June. And it would be absolutely packed wall to wall, people all weekend. It was so fun to work, exhausting, but really fun, and just a huge selection of inexpensive books. And then obviously that's the kind of thing that cannot happen now in COVID times. So we moved the warehouse sales to online, and they built out a website to have them. It's hbswarehousesale.com. It is not up and running at the moment, but we've been making it live a few times over the year as we get new stock in, and sort of still running it a little bit similarly. So it'll be a limited time, a couple of weeks, 10 days, something like that, depending on the season. And it's just a huge selection of books at a really great discount. So it'll be, a hardcover book that is otherwise a new book that you would get in the store when it first came out at $25.99, and now it's $7.99 or something like that. And it's great. It's really fun. It's really become a destination for people. Even the sort of online version has become a real event. So we've had a few of them over the course of the pandemic, and they've been great.
I definitely recommend it. I remember bringing my kids and dragging them through the warehouse in the pre-COVID days, and now I sit at my desk and do holiday shopping. It's a great way to get an array of books, and it's one of those things where it's like, oh, I like that author, but I haven't read that book. Okay, I'll get that one. Sort of, and the prices are terrific, and it's a great way to support the bookstore. So another reason to get on that mailing list.
Yes. We have another, we don't have our next one scheduled, but we'll definitely be doing one this fall. So
speaking of wonderful books, that's what we're talking about today. One of the things that we know our audience always wants to hear is what you're reading now, other than the Others Gold. What's been popular in the store, Rachel? What are you reading? Elizabeth, what have you been reading this past year? What's been a source of comfort to you, or a respite from the world?
Lots of things. So I've been reading lately. I read a lot of books that are forthcoming for work reasons. So a lot of the books that I've read lately will be coming out this fall, books that I'm really excited about. Lauren Groff has a new book coming in a few weeks.
That was on my list.
Matrix. It's so good. I love it so much.
I can't wait for that one.
It's set in a convent during the time of Eleanor of Aquitaine, and it's just incredible. It's unlike anything else of hers that I have read, but it's so good. And I just read, actually, interestingly, because it now connects to current news, but there's a book coming out in October called What Storm, What Thunder by Miriam Chauncey, which is a book about the 2010 earthquake in Haiti. And it's a novel, it's fiction, but set around that, and each chapter follows a different character. And it's an incredibly written and incredibly powerful book. And of course, they have now since had another very bad earthquake down there. So it was interesting to have read it just before that and to be thinking about that book as I've been reading news about that. So that's coming out this fall. But more recent books or current books, Crying in H Mart, I'm about halfway done, and it is incredible. It's been selling really well in the store, and it's great. The memoir by Michelle Zauner. And my favorite book of the summer is Great Circle by Maggie Shipstead, which is a really sort of big, perfect, meaty beach read kind of. And by beach read, I mean, I love a book that you can sort of dive deep into and like get engulfed by to read on the beach. And it's perfect for that. It follows a woman fiction, follows a woman who is a pilot and was attempting to fly around the world through the North and the South Poles. So fly around the world that way in the 30s. And she is lost doing that, which you find out at the very beginning of the book. But the book covers her whole life and being lost in this attempt, and then her legacy up through sort of the present day. And it is century spanning and world spanning and excellent. So that's what I've been reading. What about you, Elizabeth?
These sound so good. I brought the two books I'm reading right now. How to Blow Up a Pipeline by Andreas Malm, which I got at Harvard Bookstore. And it's what is it? A manifesto, like a kind of environmental activism book that's really interesting. I saw it recommended on Gia Tolentino's Instagram, and she had highlighted some passages, and I was like, oh my gosh, I have to, like, the moment I read these passages, I called Harvard Bookstore and was like, put this on the whole shelf for me, which is so nice to be able to do. And then Dana Spiotta's new book, Wayward, I'm reading this right now. It's so good. I'm like, I guess I'm on page 80, so I have a ways to go, but I love it. I want to read it again right after we're done talking. I'm just like, I love, when you're just like, I can't wait to get back into that. It's just so sharp and wonderful. And I love her. So those are the two I'm reading now. And what's up next? I don't know. I wanted to hear what Rachel was excited for the fall. So I'm glad she talked about that. I'm really excited for that Lauren Groff book. I'm excited for the new Sally Rooney book. I saw that Michaela Cole has a like a book of nonfiction coming out in this like September too, and I'm really obsessed with her, so I'm really looking forward to that. I think working in a bookstore where you have access to all these advanced reader copies, and as a writer you get some too, but not at the same pace that a bookseller does. It's so interesting because they're always reading things that are like not available yet. And I guess if you're on Instagram a lot, you'll see that too, like, which is nice to be tuned to what's coming next, but then you're like, I need my hands on it now. I feel like people who work at bookstores and then stop at bookstores are like, what? I have to wait for these books to come out. Your schedule totally changes.
This year when I was working from home, I think I drove my husband crazy with all of the advanced readers copies that were showing up at my house, because usually they're in piles on my desk or on my shelves at work. Yeah. But I had sales reps sending them to me at home this year, and I think he was a little overwhelmed by the quantities that were showing up in our house and piling up in our dining room. It's going to be an incredible fall for books. There's so much good stuff coming out. I'm really excited about this fall and holiday season. Yeah.
We have an audience question from Marjute that I think relates to this. What do you think? Why do people appreciate the hard copy books so much? What is it about holding a book in their hands? And what do you see about the future of books, with more and more people buying books for their Kindles or for their e-readers? What do you think? The book is dead? Do you think people will give up on holding it in their hands?
I do not think the book is dead. I know there was a lot of panic some number of years ago about sort of the rise of ebooks and how quickly they were increasing and what that was going to mean for the paper book. And I think at this point it's sort of flattened out, and certainly people are still reading ebooks, and they're reading them on their phones and on their Kindles and all of those things. But I think paper books are really staying strong, and I think a lot of people, especially in pandemic times, are spending so much time staring at screens all day, and just really don't want to be consuming their entertainment that way also. And it was a very hard year for us without events, but we definitely saw just people wanting to read increase. Just people, that being a way that people were spending their time when they were home and not out doing other things. And I think people do appreciate physical books, and we've been seeing publishers doing interesting things with physical books as objects and making them really beautiful. But I think also just people are tired of looking at their screens and want to be able to step away from that and not have their work email binging and Slack messages and text like they just want to be able to step away from all of that. I think especially this year. So I don't think they're going anywhere. I don't think ebooks are going anywhere either, but I think we've sort of, at least for now, reached an equilibrium.
Elizabeth, you've been riding out the pandemic as, well, both of you actually have been riding out the pandemic as a parent to small children. I'm so curious, Elizabeth, how do you preserve your creativity during this time of intense family time and lockdown? What have you done to fuel your writing life, to protect your writing time? We have a lot of writers who watch here on A Mighty Blaze. What advice would you give them for keeping the flame lit?
I will say that someone mentioned, I saw in the comments earlier, how online events have been really nice for people who aren't living in like major cities or even places with independent bookstores. And I thought that's totally true of people with young children too. Like at the start of the pandemic, I went to more events than I probably went to in the months before that, simply because it's sometimes like sometimes I've collapsed in a heap at 7:30. I'm not even able to make it the 2 blocks to Harvard Bookstore. So but I will say, I think that was a way I really did stay. I felt like I could stay connected to the conversation, and just sort of like, so many writers did so many great events. I feel like sometimes the intimacy, there's definitely things lost about, not exchanging the energy in person, but there were things gained too, like about interesting pairings, people who wouldn't have been able to come together, or, friends doing events. And I feel like writers were really generous, and I was really inspired. I'm always inspired by the events. This is good to talk about, because I need to get back on my more regular schedule. I think at first I was like, well, there's something every night. I'm going to do something every night. And then I slowed down, and hopefully now I can pick it back up again. As far as protecting my own writing time, I didn't really protect it very well this past year. I don't feel like I'm one to offer any sage wisdom in that regard. I really feel for people who are caring for kids or elders or themselves. I feel for everyone. I think, I guess I'd offer, if I could, just cut yourself some slack, and don't be so hard on yourself if you write a novel during this time. Like, I love it when I see tweets or Instagram posts reminding us that just having gotten through this time is something of a triumph. So really, I think it's okay also when we're not in a pandemic to have fallow times and super productive times. And for me, this has been like a big, thinking year and reading year and planning year. And I'm working, but certainly not at the pace I was, when I had regular childcare or my children were in school. And now with school and childcare starting up again, I'm really excited to sort of hit the ground running. And I hope that people who've been struggling are too. Yeah. How have you done that, Kimberly? Do you have any nuggets that you gleaned from other writers or from yourself during this time? I have my pen at the ready.
No, I think a lot of writers we've had on this show have said similar things about being kind to yourself. A couple of weeks ago, actually in June, we did a parenting panel. So we had 4 writers on who are all parents of kind of small children talking, and they all have either books out or coming out, and they talked about how they protected their time and how they wrote. And one of the writers mentioned this idea that like there's a circle of life. Like sometimes you're very productive and you're doing all this writing, and sometimes you're doing just as what you said, you're reading or you're thinking or you're resting. And maybe this is a time to rest and to just inwardly focus and to protect ourselves from like everything that's going on in the world that's difficult. But I think for me, it's like what I think when I've heard from a lot of fellow writers who are in the trenches, it's probably giving up sleep, which is,
I'm not going to write that down.
Yeah, don't write that one down. But, I think it's being kind to yourself, and, understanding that, there are some writers who have to write every single day, and I admire them. And then there are some who that doesn't work. So I think it's also understanding that there's no one way to do it.
Totally.
And that's okay. Because eventually the book will get written. Doesn't matter if it takes 2 years or 10. Well, I mean, it does, but it doesn't. So Rachel, you have a lot of authors who come into the store, I'm sure, and want their books on the shelf. And what do you say to the author who maybe is a debut or desperately wants to have their book sold at Harvard Bookstore? What's the right way to approach a bookseller? Because we've heard lots of stories about people doing it the wrong way. So what might be some advice you might offer to someone who really wants to be in
the first advice I have is to ideally have a relationship with the bookseller to start with, to be a customer of the store if possible. Obviously, you can't be a customer of every single store, but it's so much easier to start a relationship with an author, to have a mutual relationship with an author if there's somebody that we feel like we know, not just because they hopefully have spent some money with us, and it doesn't have to be a lot of money. We just sort of want to know that they are in our space and know what we're about and know who we are. But also so that we know that they are sort of invested in the book doing well with us, because we have many, many titles in the store, and we can't market each one. We can't display each one necessarily, even if we can for a little while. We can't necessarily for very long. There are lots of new books every single week. So we would like to know that the bookseller or that the author is able to point people toward us, is supporting the book and is supporting the bookstore in a way that will benefit both of us, because we're happy to do our part to the extent that we can, and work with authors and to the extent that we can, but we can't do everything. And so it's really helpful to know that we're sort of having a mutual relationship, and to understand that we're all on the same team and we want your book to succeed. And honestly, even if we say, I'm really sorry, we can't carry this book right now, that's not because we don't want it to succeed. It's just because of the millions of logistics around bookstores. So to understand that we're on the same team and to sort of work with us on that.
Great. So I have a question for you, Rachel, that we ask all of the booksellers who come on Authors Love Bookstores. Please finish this sentence for us.
Okay.
Running a successful bookstore is part hard work, part luck, and part, what else?
Part hard work, part luck, and part, I would say, passion. I mean, none of us are in this to make millions of dollars. We are in this because we love to read, and we love books, and we love authors, and we love readers, and we love having those conversations. So I think passion for books is really so important in this business. And that is not to say that we're not a capitalist enterprise, and we do want to make money, and we do need to pay people fairly, and all of those things. But it just is so much more successful when we can recommend books better when we love them, or we understand what people love about books.
Like a book like this.
Thanks. Thank you.
So we're coming to the end of our time, and I know, Elizabeth, you had a lot of questions you wanted to ask too. Was there anything that you wanted to get in before we say goodbye?
We covered so much. I feel like you had so many questions I wanted to ask. I did have like some rapid fire questions that, if you want to do them, just for fun. Okay.
Yes,
I
so
just
now I feel like you're lobbying for my job, Elizabeth.
Oh, well, I was like, I'm just so excited to get, I'm definitely not, but I'm okay. I'll just rapid fire. So you can just answer one of the two, or you can just say pass if you don't want to answer. So bookmark or dog ear?
Bookmark. I'm not against dog earing, but usually a bookmark.
Okay. Paperback or hardcover?
Paperback.
Ooh.
Alphabetical or rainbow arrangement? Book arrangement.
In
your home.
At my house, they are arranged alphabetically by author, but we have a signed books shelf. We have fiction separate from nonfiction, and we do have a set of like Norton Critical Editions are all together, and Oxford World Classics are all together. My husband is an English a writing instructor, a writing professor, so we have a lot of books.
My husband is also a professor, so I feel like I understand your very complicated system. Okay, Juan Little Husks or overstuffed hyperrealist sagas?
Juan Little Husks, I think.
Bookstagram or Book Talk?
Bookstagram. I'm too old for Book Talk.
One book at a time. Well, I think I know the answer, but one book at a time or one book in each room at a time?
I often have two books at a time going. I used to have like a commute book and a bedside book. That's a little bit different now, but I often have a fiction and a nonfiction.
I guess last one, notes and margins or I would never?
Notes and margins, definitely. We should have made you answer all of those too. I'm curious about you.
I was like, I think I just was like, this would be fun to yeah. Although I think there's no wrong answer. All of these are. It's just interesting to see how people feel about the book as a physical object, and especially when you are with them so much, and you still. I think that's so amazing about booksellers. Are like you see how many books come out every week. You are surrounded by books, and you still have this passion and devotion. It's not like you just kind of burn out. I mean, I'm sure there's ways to burn out, but just the love.
I mean, I go on vacation, and I go into an indie bookstore wherever I go on vacation, and I'm so thrilled to browse in that store, even if most of the books are ones that are in my store and I picked out and I know them, and it's still so fun to see what's new and coming. And there are a lot of new books coming out every week. For people who don't know, most books are published on Tuesdays. So go into your local bookstore on Tuesdays, and there are just new books all the time, and so much exciting stuff coming every week.
Elizabeth, we may have to steal those rapid fire questions.
Please, I have more too. I didn't want to go over it, but I'm happy to send you the other rapid fire.
Those are awesome. I love them. Though I have to say, I could never write in a book. Like I think the thing that's really interesting is I always think of every book as super precious. And I love the way Rachel, even with a bookstore of 13,000 titles, they each are precious, right? I'm getting the sense that like, you don't grow tired of them. They're still each time they're a thing of wonder and
not at all
excitement.
You know, when an advanced reading copy of an author I really loved shows up, I'm like clutching it to my chest. It is like a new, exciting, precious thing. And it's the same when they come into the store.
Wonderful. Thank you so much to both of you for being with us today. I've been so looking forward to this conversation and getting a chance to spend time with you. And we're so grateful that you made time for A Mighty Blaze. Thank you.
For having me. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. And thank you, Elizabeth, for picking us. This was so fun.
Of course. The love is real.
To our audience, if you liked today's show, and we hope that you did, please subscribe to A Mighty Blaze on Facebook so you can get notified about all of our other events, or hop over to our website, amightyblaze.com, to sign up for our newsletter, which goes out every Monday and gives you the rundown of all of our shows for the week. We'll be back in 2 weeks on September 8th with another episode of Authors Love Bookstores. We cannot wait to be rejoined with you then. So until then, be well and keep reading. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.